to do multiple exposures or double exposures is hopefully why you clicked on this video. And I'm going to explain what it is firstly. And let me know if you think the thumbnail looks cool, because that was my and one of my friends' first time doing double exposure on a digital camera, which is a lot harder than it looks. But the overall effect is very cool in my opinion. But yeah, no, so basically what double exposures are is, I think the term was coined from a film camera because obviously exposures, so you have 36, 24 exposures, something like that on a film camera, and it's essentially exposing the same area twice. But I'll get onto that later on in the video near the end if you want to know more about film. Let's get into digital. So digital is basically like superimposing whatever you want into one image. So if you wanted like a landscape with a silhouette, if you wanted long exposure with portraits, stuff like that, the effect also can be done using Photoshop and stuff like that. But I think if your camera can do it, it's just a bit more cleaner. Like a lot of the Canon, like expensive SLRs can do it. The photos that I'm going to show throughout this video were shot on the Nikon DS300, DS300, something like that. I'll put the camera here because I've forgotten what it is. It's my friend's camera, which is very cool because none of my cameras do have multiple exposure, which is quite sad. So things to keep in mind when you want to do double exposures like the ones like this shot. What you need to do is you need to sort of, it's really complicated until you actually do it. You want to plan out your first shot with the second shot in mind. So what I mean by that is you want to use the shadows in the first shot to put your second shot in, like kind of like this one. That makes it more easy to explain. So what we had to do for this shot is we had to cover half of the lens, essentially cover half of the lens with anything really. You can use like a phone case, a cover, something black preferably because you want a shadow type vibe. And we covered half of the lens, and essentially that we had to keep that in mind unless your viewfinder shows you where the first composition is. We had to keep that composition in mind and then kind of eyeball where we had to put the second shot in. And obviously because we were doing a long exposure, we kind of had to really keep that in mind. And all of these were shot with the 35mm lens on the Nikon D3500. But yeah, no, so some expensive cameras, like a lot of the Canon ones, essentially you can take the first shot and it'll be in the viewfinder, which is really sick. And you can literally just see what will fit into that image, and then it will superimpose the image, and then boom, one composition, which is really nice. But yeah, no, so some expensive cameras let you do that. We did not have the luxury of that, so we kind of had to eyeball it. So what we were aiming for was like a long exposure shot, as you can see from some of the shake in some of the images. So on the left hand side, I'm pretty sure we used like 1/5 of a second, which we didn't even need, to be honest, because we were using a softbox light for that. But you can use literally, like, if you have like a light bar, something like that, like a neon light, something like that, you can use if you want to try and recreate this. And on the right side, because we had to light paint that a bit longer, we used 2 seconds on a tripod as well. That is a given. Always shoot with the tripod if you can. Best shots, because the handshake is just not fun. And moving on from, if you want to do more like not long exposure, just silhouettes, like this image that is so, it's kind of beautiful, isn't it? Let's be honest. And it looks a lot harder than it actually is. If you can really keep, what your sort of goal is in mind, it is a lot easier. So what you want to do for that is, I haven't experimented much with this yet, but what you want to do with that is you want to have a silhouette. So basically like it has to be like kind of like the outline of a person, and keep that in mind of what pose they did, and don't change the orientation. Changing the orientation is going to screw everything up. If you shot landscape, do the second shot as landscape and just continue that, and pick a nice landscape as well for the second shot. But basically you need to get like a black outline in the first shot, and then what you want is in the shadows of that second of the first shot, the second shot will appear. So that's what you want to keep in mind when you do that sort of stuff. It's pretty popular with multiple exposures, that one. Moving on to film photographers. I love all you guys, the film photographers, man. The dedication to keep analog alive in 2024 is very much needed, because I'm seeing the prices of film and I want those to come down a bit. So hopefully if everybody just sort of buys them. But you know what? That's just going to drag the price up anyway. Yeah, no, moving on from that. So some film cameras actually come with multiple exposure settings, which is really weird to me, because this Canon EOS 300, which I've had for about 10-15 years, this has double exposures. My Canon EOS 500D does not have double exposures, which is really sad. But you know what? We live and we learn. But yeah, if you want to shoot with film photography, it's easier for me to explain, to be honest. You're exposing the same piece of film twice. So in the first shot, let's just say for the argument's sake, it's a portrait, silhouette portrait as well. It's again the same steps as digital, everything that I've said throughout this video, except depending on the roll of film that you're shooting, let's say Kodak Gold 200, for example, you're going to have to push the ISO up. You're going to have to shoot at 400, and yeah, that's the main thing. You're going to have to push your ISO to 400, or if you've got 400 film, push it to 800, etc., etc. You're going to have to just double what your film is and shoot it that way, because that's what works best for multiple exposures. You can't just do it like a digital camera. You need to sort of push it extra. And with this camera, you can actually take up to 9 shots in the same piece of film, which is crazy to me. So if you want to like have a superimposed image, like kind of like Stephanie Young, people like that, you can. 9 shots in one. It'll look chaotic, but if that's the look that you're gonna go for, why not? But you just have to keep in mind that the first shot, in the shadows, the darkness is where the second shots and the next shots that you take will appear. And if you want to even experiment with like 3 shots, like the thumbnail, why not? Because it's definitely, I think double exposures is definitely, especially on film, it's very exciting because you can't see it, of course. But I think also just the process and like what you can do with double exposures, because it's just superimposing 2 images together. And I think it's definitely good for developing your photography skills, because you can try and see what sort of aesthetics go together and kind of work together, you know, especially like landscapes and portraits. Everybody's done that, but why don't we think outside of the box? And I don't know, like water and fire is what we took for inspiration. We didn't get anything like that because, yeah, no. But we tried our best to signify that with what we shot. And I think that was the main thing that we wanted to do. We didn't want actual water and fire because we have experimented with those elements on their own before. But what can we do as a double exposure where we want it to be a long exposure as well? We want it to be sharp but not. Yeah, so just thinking outside of the box really. But I think the fact that film can do stuff that digital can't, like some digital cameras can't, is amazing to me. And yeah, you might not be able to see it, but I mean, it's worth a shot, isn't it? And especially if you try and like pre-plan what you're going to do, I don't see how it could go wrong. And just enjoy it as well. Like, I know if you want that, like we did, we wanted a specific shot and we kept going and going and going. We didn't get the initial shot that we wanted, but we got stuff that we actually were happy about and pleased about. So I think that's the main thing for double exposures, because it does take you a while to master them. It's kind of like long exposures. It's a really hard technique to learn and master, especially if you have to eyeball it and you don't have like the layers technology which lets you see it in the view. I'm so jealous of people that can see it in the viewfinder. It's such a cool thing to me. But yeah, no, that's literally it. And let me know what you guys thought of this video and the composition. I'm trying out something new, you know, head and shoulders. You can't even see the table anymore, which is weird. But yeah, no, that's pretty much it for this video, guys, and take it easy.